Um, Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this third session for this series of webinars dedicated on coastal observing systems of islands and an ocean, and I'm happy today to see you all very numerous, registered from mainly from the Indian Ocean, but also from different geographic areas across the planet, because the topic interests. It is something that interests almost everyone, and launch a lot of reflection for sustainable observatories and useful not only to bankerize data, but also to transfer information, and useful because it can serve on the management and the good choice, strategic choice in terms of conservation and preservation of nature and coastal ecosystems for decision makers, policy makers, when we need to sensitize through those robust data. So today we are on the third week with the Conservatoire du Littoral of La Réunion, and then ECHO, but also under a partnership with our colleague or friends from RECOS project on coastal um, island resilience, supported by the IOC, and also funded by the French Development Agency and the French Environment Facility. So many of you now know how it works. We propose you to ask your question in the chat box, the question box. Elisa will take them and summarize them, and then we'll ask the question during the two exchange sessions um, for today. For interpretation, you see on the small globe there is Bellarmine who is interpreting into French or into English as necessary. So I will try to speak as slow as possible to facilitate his work. For the speakers, I would like uh, to invite you to open your cameras and microphone when you are speaking, and everything will be registered on our platform, which will be implemented, using the different microphone by Robots project. So quickly, which is very important, is to mention the context and objectives under eco solutions with different partners of researchers and scientists and NGOs and institutions, whether public or private, at national or regional level, and the company networks as well. For us to think together of positive solution to better preserve the ocean coastal parts and areas. I myself, I work as a corporation of the French public facility who buy um, parcels of coastline in order to turn them into restored development and welcoming sites in France. And 14% of the French coastline will be open to the public and managed by the partners on local authorities. Now I give the floor to my partners from the RECOS project for us to talk about more on the project and on IOC. Elisa, the floor is yours. Good morning, everyone. So the IOC is an intergovernmental organization composed of islands, Africa, Réunion, Madagascar, Mauritius, Seychelles, Comoros, and it's the only intergovernmental organization exclusively made of islands, and that's why it's acting different projects and areas, including maritime security, agriculture, and preservation of environment. So it is the under RECOS project, which means resilience of coastal ecosystems of the Indian Ocean area, funded by AFD and FFM, which promotes the resilience of coastal population to the effect of climate change in this part of the planet. Thank you very much, Elisa, for summarizing this. So she's the one to collect all the question, and you just click on the icon on Q&R, and then you will have she is going to collect all the questions being dropped there. So as I told you, the first session on the 6th of June was more of a generalist approach on the setting up, facilitation, and sustainability of an observing system. The last week on 10th of June was on the focus on coastal erosion and climate change impact. That was on the second session on 10th of June. Today we are going to work mainly on the management of biodiversity and coastal ecosystems, how we analyze, collect, and bankerize those data to value, capitalize, and systemize all of these. And thanks to our three guests today, and for next week, for the last session, we will focus on socio-economic dynamics. Just quickly, just to present our partners who work on the organization of these partners. There is Anne, Elisa. Anne will be at the back of this. We are very happy for this partnership. I also thank Bellarmine for the interpretation, which is simultaneous, just behind the scene. And today we are going to have two case studies, which will be presented by Christelle and Gwenaël, and then there will be a question and answer. So the first one will explain the different approach for biodiversity, by specifically on biodiversity, island biodiversity. So we'll have Gérard, and then Christelle Béranger, who is talking about the Martiniquez Observatory, and then a new intervention by Gwenaël, and then the last we have a two question and answer session after each presentation. So as I told you, I would like to show you the pictures of the speakers. We have Gérard, Christelle, and Gwenaël. So I would like to let Gérard to introduce himself. So Gérard, could you please introduce yourself? Tell us who you are. Good morning, everyone. I am the scientific director of Island Biodiversity Conservation Center. It is a center for biodiversity and conservation islands in the University of Seychelles. It is an NGO. We are around local dozen scientists who created this center, and we would like to associate 12 associate members who are outside Seychelles but who come there for different programs. Thank you very much, Gérard. Yeah, I think that's enough. Yes, you are going to develop later on during your presentation. Now let's give the floor to Christelle Béranger. Good morning, and thank you for joining us. Where are you reaching out, joining us, Christelle? Good morning, everyone. My name is Christelle Béranger. I am the manager of biodiversity enhancement and natural species at the Regional Natural Park of Martinique. So it is a structure that covers several authorities in the island of Martinique on valuing cultural and natural heritage. And so we have a mission on the biodiversity and Martinique Observatory, and a mission on we have different projects of studies and valuing biodiversity. Thank you very much. A lot of experience, a lot of feedback on experience from you to be expected. And Gwenaël, could you please introduce yourself? Good afternoon. Tell us who you are. Good morning, everyone. My name is Gwenaël Dulariel. I work with the Association Entrepreneur and oceanology. These are structures that are dealing with thematics relating to the sea. We have a setting up of ecosystem observatory, mainly in the Mediterranean Sea, but also the creation of expedition, restoration, ecological restoration. And today I intervene under the management and animation of observatory in the Mediterranean level, which is known as metrics. Thank you very much, Gonoel. These are three examples to illustrate the islands and the coast. You will be with Christelle and Gonoel from which illustrates, in fact, this marine thematic. Now I give the floor right away to Gerard. So let's ask him to open his camera for his experience in the island. And today will be to give an experience, his great experience. So, Gerard, the floor is yours. Thank you very much. I would like to apologize because there are some slides that I'm not going to comment. I'm just going to skip them. And I don't want to go to take too much time. So, as I told you, it is an NGO because we have a lot of liberty with the university, but of course, it is up to us to provide all the funding when we would like to conduct some studies, some work on different researches on biodiversity, mainly on different species, etc. So it is more or less to underline this difficulty on the fact that in developing countries, there are most of the time we don't have a board which will attribute for species, for rare species. There are funds to continue, in fact, the biodiversity in general. We need to take advantage of the opportunities. So I think that we need to next slide. So one of the things we do many things. So my colleagues, the botanists, can also say things about this in terms of flora. But we work a lot on restoration of islands because there are species being extinct, and why do we focus on the small islands? Because these are places where there are rare species where they refuge, and they need to be saved from extinction. For there are only 12 individuals on the island in 2080, and try to work in this island to create this type of refuge exempt of predators. And secondly, in these islands, there is no rodents, no rodents, no cats, and so on. And that's why with concentration of marine wildlife of international importance, such as seabirds and nesting turtles. And thanks to their small size, there is a possibility to restore the ecosystem, to eliminate invasive species, and replant also trees and so on. Next, please. I'm not going to comment this one. It's only next. I'd like to insist on the importance of the islands because they gather more than 20% of biodiversity while having only 5% of the species. So we have the rodents here. It's one of the species that has the most negative impact on biodiversity, responsible for 86% of extinction of species in the world. Maybe 3/3 of extinction in islands and in the Indian Ocean. We conducted 60 eradications of rodents and cats in the Western Indian Ocean. In Seychelles, we did this in about 15 eradication in 10 islands, and there is a lot of difference on the terrible impact of those rodents and cats on local fauna in Seychelles and in the globe. We also have a very high density, for example, 120 per hectares, because there are no predators. They are there all along the years. So then it becomes a problem for the economy when they go extinct. So we also have some species, which means we take a species to have nowhere else to go, and we what we do is to transfer them. As you see in this slide, we saved them from extinction. It was in critical danger. Now it is vulnerable. Unfortunately, in 2017, the rat was there, and the only one population was totally destroyed. So, fortunately, we could conduct some transfer thanks to the population, and we could save this specific species. So what are the data that we collect to assess feasibility and monitoring biodiversity? The main challenge is to acquire data are the cost of access and transportation costs, accommodation, logistics, the boats, the satellite phones, all of these cost a lot of money, insurance, possibility of repatriation in case of accident. And so beyond all this, we really need to do this, but there is the fact that most of the time we only have 1 year of data for restoration, and that is very difficult. So this is simply to say that when we do the species translocation, we need to evaluate the trust or the suitability of habitat, that there should be available food of grains, invertebrates to welcome the translocated, but also availability of suitable sites and so on. For vegetation, we take some samples for the islands, and we introduce them, for example, in an island, but we will measure the structure of the vegetation. We'll see in each strata what will be the abundance of each plant species, and once we would have done that, we will see for the species of the most dominant plants to measure their abundance of invertebrates. So for the vegetation, it is more in detail, because each vegetation point is divided into 20 meter, 24%. We will try to estimate the abundance of each species. We noted this between 0 to 4, and this will allow us to calculate the index. And with this, and with the richness in invertebrate, we will be able to, with some models, to be able to define and to forecast, to predict the species that we would like to translocate with. And it is important before doing that to determine what they prefer. I mean, these species, it's not that you find a species that it will prefer this particular location. So there is the aspect of selectivity, the preference that are indicated in this graph, both for the species and strata. So there are also other methods, monitoring methods that we apply for the monitoring of seabirds, of course, and land birds and reptiles as well, with point counts and the distance sampling. For invertebrate, there are pitfall traps or leaf counts. We already talked about vegetation, quadrats, and point transects. We will establish a baseline, an initial baseline, and sometimes we really need to contact our empirical wildlife observation on fauna and flora to know and see whether there are information from the different observers. It is already something. Next. So, for example, here for the Seychelles area, it is there is a very threatened species, and with the population of the frigate, as you could see here, it has increased quickly and regularly. we see the sex ratio which was balanced from a few years, the past few years, and death mortality has decreased as well. So these are the kind of thing as the same as with women. In this one, I'm not going to delay on this. Just when we add or we take out some species, there is a change on the biodiversity. Um, I mean, if you study them, you could see your invasive species in Seychelles. This book will be available with some chapters here. So how the ecosystems of restored islands responded? Well, for seabirds, it's most of the time there is a very tangible increase. In fact, a very strong increase. But mind you, in some cases, it may take time because there is no colony of seabirds, and before they decide to get settled, we try to attract them. So for reptiles, there is an increase as well, but there is also a diminution after rodents and cats have been eradicated because they nourish from this. So that's why we have a reduced number um, of reptiles. Next, please. So in general, all of the seabirds or, or, have a recovery of 23 population of 9 different species. For land birds, it's more or less the same. Most of them are most increased and recolonized after eradication, and a few initially declined but recovered were well beyond initial abundance. For reptiles, sometimes they remain stable or in increasing trend, and for large invertebrates, snails, beetles, and millipedes and crabs are often recover. So finally, at the end of the day, related to the validation, look at what happens when we remove the red dots. You have a forest like this on the size. This is a 7-year forest. There are 10-meter heights that we could see, but the rodents kill them because now there is this forest appearing, and we observe them in different forests. So what we do with these is, first of all, we may have an access type database, etc. And then there is a colleague, Bruno Santerre, from IBC. He then created a database, in an interactive database known as Bio, to which everyone contributed, NGOs and public entities, individuals, and observation that are more naturalist in eBirds, and everything I have been talking about. In the next slide, all of these could be put in relation with DB, the Global Biodiversity Conservation Center Information Facility. So everyone will see the metadata. They can propose some collaboration, ask questions if they are interested in, and we on our side, internally, we have a section that will allow to question in an interactive way, where to be such species will be found. In another section, you could see the photo of plants, such as here we have the canal, etc. And finally, to end, how are we going to value? Next slide, please. All of this data, for example, here, next slide. Yeah, the seabirds. So how are we going to value all of this data? Well, by promoting island restoration by showcasing biodiversity gains. And then there is a lot of gains through different posters in conferences, in our scientific publications in Seychelles, chapter 6 in the book IAS in Seychelles. It will talk about all of this. So it is in English, but You can download it very soon, the full version, and in Conference International, or we also have some synthesis as we did in 2017. And the last slide will be on, of course, the scientific publications. The scientific publications which are done at, let's say, shell level, as mentioned in the previous slide, or at the regional level, or at the global level. So we contribute to the data to illustrate the gains in terms of biodiversity that are observed in all of these islands where we conduct restoration activities in general. That's it. Thank you very much, Gerard, for this introduction. Very generous on management of small islands in Seychelles. You can download the book you were talking about. This particular book in this webinar now. Once the next presentation of Christelle is done, we will move to the question and answer session. But now, Christelle, please don't hesitate to drop your question in the chat box, in the Q&A box, and then there will be another question for Gerard as well. So, Christelle, thank you very much. I will let you start right away. The floor is yours. Thank you very much, Fabrice. So the objective of my presentation is to present Martinique biodiversity and to develop some data bancarization and dissemination, and also some advice for the setting up of biodiversity observatory. So OMB, or Biodiversity Martinique Observatory, which is a multi-partner mechanism made up of 46 members. There are regional public authorities, scientists, and so on, NGOs. We gather a lot of actors. We signed an operating charter in 2015, and we have an annual budget of 80 to 150,000 euros. So next, please. So to take the purpose of our observatory, we focus on biological diversity of Martinique, which is an island in the Antilles, the French Antilles. Also, we work on the marine and different missions, whether common, rare, or invasive species. We work on geodiversity and interactions between society and biodiversity. We have 3 missions: to collect and disseminate knowledge about the biodiversity of Martinique, and monitor the state of biodiversity through indicators, and to support local stakeholders in considering biodiversity, whether public or private stakeholders. We have several tools for collecting and disseminating information and data. So for collecting and disseminating information, we have our website. We will also have a resource center which gather more than 2,000 resources with a lot of reports, scientific articles to disseminate. This is for information collect, data that have been analyzed. Other side, we also have tools for collecting and disseminating data, more than gross data. There is a platform, Madinati, we launched in November 2022, which is a real tool for decision making. We are integrated in the SENP standard, which is the Natural Heritage Inventory Information System. So there are a lot of data, and the SNP platform of Martinique. So here you see a screenshot of this Madinati platform. You see a mapping of Martinique, and then we could see all of the information on the species that are available on the island, whether land species or freshwater or marine species. By doing this, we could generate and access to like a summary information sheet on their availability, on the regulation, And on the other side, we could also conduct a research on the data that we have integrated on the platform. And for all this data, little by little, we can integrate the data transmitted by the contributors, the member of Biodiversity Observatory, and other external structures and resource persons. So on this second screenshot, you see the the Martinique platform, and you see here an example of research because it is possible on this platform to conduct research by species, but also by area, by space, and we could generate the data exactly that are collected. And here, for example, on this screenshot, you have the research on the whole data, and we see more than 30,000 observation, and you see it is very important to talk about this on the next part of the presentation. There is a restitution. I mean, in this part, it is 1 out of 2 kilometers, so there is the sensitiveness of data, and then in the basic structure, little by little, all of the data that are not sensitive one will be presented at a more accurate level to adjust according to the sensitiveness level of the data. So you saw that the whole data are gathered and collected, and there is also another, the same tool Madinati that will try to centralize and restitute the data for the online contributors. And in terms of data bankarization, there are a lot of requests, a lot of data valorization. And before launching the platform, because since the launching of Observatory in 2015, we were already collecting a lot of data, so we already used them. And this valorization could be done by articles being disseminated and the newsletters as well to illustrate the knowledge we have gathered. And we could also draft what we call IUCN red list for Martinique on the pre-evaluation. After that, they were also on drafting territorial planning documents with data are available for local urbanization plan will allow us to on the land use in Martinique and also on the coherence scheme as well for the agglomeration. And recently we could try to use this data under what we call communal municipal biodiversity atlas, and there are also exchange on this data that contributes to the drafting of plan and the data that will be centralized for this. They could also feed the platform. So there is really a regular collect by different projects. So for the implementation of our biodiversity, would you please come back quickly on a few advice and new prerequisite? As you could see, we have even the Biodiversity Observatory in Martinique. There is a structure, there is a lot of work, a lot of efforts done on the creation, animation, the training of contributors network. And it is important to follow, to adhere to a standard for structuring data sets for the sake of interoperability, for these data to be processed with the same information. And we will have some data and cases, but it's good to have a standard. And then the important thing is to support and train contributors. When we exchange the data, there is always support to explain the standard according to the competence level of a partner, and we can do the work to have structured data. And before the centralization and restitution of data, it is important to reflect on the sensitivity of the data. As you could see on the platform, we chose to do restitution per mile that will allow us to collect those information. And we can also support these players. It is very important to understand and address different potential barriers to data transmission. For example, concretely, right from the beginning of the observatory launch, we gathered all of the different partners and we organized a working workshop to understand, especially which was a solution for. Next slide. So beyond the information that we will have disseminated, there is a lot of work as all with all observatory. It is a work that we conducted right from the launch of the observatory. We work on state pressure and response indicators following the methodology of a national biodiversity observatory. It means that right from the launch, we organized workshop and identify the issues on biodiversity, regular biodiversity monitoring and surveillance. So the objective is to identify regular biodiversity monitoring and surveillance. And today we could target different issues and we could respond, for example, by studying the evolutive, the rare invasive species, the distribution or the natural status, and how the funding allocated to these observations evolve, but also to the actions and responses in this biodiversity. So, as a perspective, in the next years or months, we will try to identify around 30 indicators to be monitored, following the experience from the Biodiversity Regional Observatory in France by Serena Structure. So, with all of the feedback of our OMB, it will be good to have those indicators to make sure of the responses we will have. That's our perspective. So I will end with this last slide to talk about a dissemination of knowledge, of data. Earlier, we've seen our website to disseminate information with different targets, audiences. For example, our newsletter and thematic seminars twice a year to our partners, the public, and so on. We also have thematic seminars, and the last one in January this year, it was, and it is a topic that interests a lot of people for the safeguarding biodiversity, and for the students and public, we use posters, animations, and educational day games for children. We have the knowledge that we gathered in the form of board games for the knowledge of Martinique. And to end, the perspective that we have in the next 2 years is to publish a panorama of Martinique's biodiversity. We will gather and see all the indicators and key numbers to value all of this information at local actors. Thank you for your kind attention. Thank you very much, Christelle, for presenting the structure of this observatory. I would like to ask Gerard to ask the different questions that you have received. So, Christelle, please also stay with us because you will need to answer the questions. The first question for Gerard, let's ask whether under the activities of your center, are there any collaboration with other observatories in fauna and flora or other NGOs who also capitalize and bankerize general data on fauna and flora of Seychelles? And after all this question, are there partnership and exchanges with the dynamics on different thematics such as coastal erosion and socioeconomic problematics? So collaboration and other larger topic as well. Yes, for collaboration, yes, because most of the time in an island, naturally, there are islands that we call, there is a replanting of species, but the marine park are there. We collaborate on marine turtles, you see. there are things that will also interest people. We will work together on this aspect. Yeah, it happens very often that we could partner with other entities, other interesting organization. We can exchange data. We collect data together. So for the second question, whether we also deal with coastal erosion and other sectors, not really under marine turtles, not us, but there is other NGOs with whom we collaborate because we have within our members some people who are both with IBC and involved IBC and who will be interested in this. So we are interested in on the erosional aspect for marine turtles because it presents a very huge agenda for the turtles, and that's why we are implementing, for example, on many islands in relation with the manager of those islands. For social aspect, and not really, we have some members who are interested in the social aspect, but are rather work with our Sustainability for Seychelles or other NGOs, but not our association. We do not deal with the social aspect, but there are some NGOs who deal with this. Thank you, especially on climate change. Question for Christelle, and then I will give the floor to Elisa as well. With so many questions, so we were asked how the governance of your observatory, as you said, it is still an informal structure. So how are the strategic choices, leadership, who are piloting, managing? Well, there is no structure. So how then do people are hired and know, well, do they work permanently? And there is also a question on the budget. If you could answer those two questions, governance and then budget and structure. Well, for the first question on governance, we have an organization that is very well written on the operating charter, signed by the members, and there is a general assembly of members, maybe twice a year, and we distribute some guidelines, and it is on different ideas, different projects, which are very well defined on the operating charter. We can consider this, and we also have a steering committee, and in this steering committee we'll have the facilitator on the starting of the presentation. There is an assembly which is animated by the Regional Park of Martinique. It can be by myself. We are permanent employee of another NGO, and under this steering committee you will see the regional natural park and also the project fund, and we'll have people or structures who are elected with renewable contract for 2-3 years. So in these steering committees, we vote, for example, the annual funding and the activity program, and if there is any proposition to try to innovate. So that's for governance. And as I said, there are how many employees that will allow us to continue, because since 2015 and we have not stopped on project, and it allow us to organize events, signature of some representative at the park level. And on the budget, the budget is from the national park, but mostly we submit is on the activity steering committee to be used in different activities such as organizing the events. Thank you very much, Christelle. Elisa, do you have any other question? The floor is yours. Yeah, we have a question for Gérard. Someone is asking, when we will eradicate other invasive species, can we find the previous ecosystem of these invasive species? And And there is also a question for Christelle. Are the observatory data used to draft a belief policy for advocacy at the level of competent authorities? Well, for the case, the answer is no. In fact, it is a slide where I skipped, I was passing very quickly with some figures. I don't know if we can come back on this, but in fact, when we remove an invasive species, the ecosystem itself has some balance already. It can be balanced. So when we remove a species, there will be other invasive species who will multiply because if you remove the rust, you will have more mouses, more mice, or things like this. And the same way, when we introduce a new species, a bird, which will be an insect predator, etc. So it will also modify the ecosystem balance. So we never resume to the to the past stages, but we try to go closer to the former state. That's why we talk about rehabilitation or rather than restoration. There is a rather difference on these two terms. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Christelle.
Thank you,
Oui, alors pour la
Christelle.
question de l'utilisation des données
On the data
environnementales
use
visuelles
question, as you
sur
have
de nombreux
seen,
projets.
they are used on different projects, and then in terms of
Ça n'a pas été le cas, mais comme vous l'avez vu
for the advocacy, they were not in use, but in
s'appuyer sur
terms of planning,
et
the local
accompagner
authorities
de plus en
can
plus
rely on this data.
par exemple
And also for a project on impact study, clearly this data, we do receive some requests and they are disseminated when there is a contributors or a partners or none of local authorities. So we can inform them by giving all of the disclaimer on their use because we opened this since November 2022. We explained that these data are not exhaustive, but these are the data we have covered for such period, and it is important to add further inventory and also to be able to inventory on different periods, just to take it as a pre-existing data, and then you need to also confirm them. A question for Gérard on the economic valorization. I think that it was also a topic that will be raised on the next session, but under a public mission for valorization, restoration, all of these activities. And there is data accumulation. So how then can we value this data economically speaking? We're putting the data available as they have been funded by public money for other projects or other actors. So how then what about the ownership of those data? Well, there is something we have standardized, something that we do in France. Well, first of all, everything depends on what type of a program. If we, well, most of the time, these islands are private or managed by a particular NGO, which are most of the time own those islands. It is the case of the Cousin, the Island Conservation Society, which is co-founder, and we also own the arid island. And here, the data we gather is most of the time in partnership with other scientists, IBC organization, and there are bilateral convention and agreement. But in general, when you work on an island and there is a biodiversity team which is established, then you are going to share the data. The data will belong to the two parties. Now, when it is a case of studies funded by public fund, which transited from the Ministry of Environment, for example, in Seychelles, or from the FEM, then the government will have a copy the project coordinating unit will call this Jeff project, for example. They will have a copy of all these. But as I told you, it's not always. Let's say that there is no general framework. It is more or less case by case.
Merci.
Yeah, via the convention.
Être sûr de bien encadrer de manière à
Yeah, it is very good to understand who will own the data from the producer up to the user as well. It's a question I will also try to answer. And then the last question will be for Elisa. What is the difference between data, information, and knowledge? So for those who are interested, there is known as EcoChico, and the second of which it was dedicated on knowledge management. And to summarize on gross product, it is 14 or 18 or 32 degree. So there is a protocol that produces data and analyze them to we transfer them into information that may mean something in terms of the arrival of exotic species, and we make them understandable through analysis and the analysis of the data. So the information, and once all these are capitalized on long term for the knowledge, we can capitalize and disseminate them. That's the difference between data and information and knowledge for the term of communication, to transform them into, depending on the target audience, and the target decision makers, or for the sake of communication, to convey a message, to translate them into political actions. So I think that's about this. Elisa, you had the last question on regional. Yeah, yes. Someone is asking, in fact, as we know that there are different platforms which compile data, metadata, information. So shouldn't we enrich and fill these existing bases rather than creating new ones? And are there synergy for monitoring and management of those bankerized data between the islands of the Caribbean and Antilles?
Oui, donc tout à fait. En
Yes,
fait,
indeed, there are several platforms,
vraiment le lien avec
but we are really the link between, French Antilles, the West Indies, such as the Guadeloupe. There are many ultimate overseas territory. We have one in La Réunion and one in Mayotte. So we exchange regularly between the platform, and when the platform progress on the same open source system used, it will benefit the whole platform, and we really keep this synergy between the different structures who are manager of the tool, and of course the link in the standard, which is SNP, the information system of natural heritage. We have this link with the different French regions, and with the international level, to create exactly the same standard and the same support. There is a synergy, and we also do this link when we use the data. When we collect them, you were talking about international tools such as Sweeper or GPWIF and Naturalis. So, of course, using those links, it is good to take those data to be used in different tool in terms of a municipal the biodiversity atlas, and so I can confirm that we have a synergy. One last additional reply on this question. In fact, it works between the French islands, because we have at the national level who facilitate the exchange, and at international level and the regional cooperation with the other Caribbean region state. Is it complicated? Does it work in terms of experience exchange? So how does it work? Christelle, can you answer my question?
Est-ce que tu peux reprendre?
Could you please repeat again the question? So the question was between the French regions, Thanks to the CNP, we can promote this exchange in the platform. But how does it work? Is there a need or a challenges? Whether it works with other Caribbean countries. Yes, on the Caribbean region, we know that with Botanic Natural Park, there are project Interreg. We work also under a good that was registered as a UNESCO World Heritage, that has the Martinique volcano. There are also exchanges with the neighboring islands. So we do have this network in terms of platform. It is also exchanged with other structure who manage all of the data and information for the island, the Dutch, Caribbean Dutch islands, who also have a similar tool on internet. That there are similar actions and projects that look the same, and we wish, and that's the objective in the next coming years, to get closer to the neighboring islands, to show our example, and see whether they also exist, and we exchange regularly on our platform. Thank you very much, Christelle. I would like to free the two of you to give the floor to Gwenaël, and then later on at the end, there might be some general question with you. So with Gwenaël, let's go to and see what is happening in the Mediterranean region, which is very rich as well in terms of experience, the production of a platform, which is rather different. And so, Gwenaël, the floor is yours. Thank you. So once again, good afternoon. Today, the objective of this presentation is to address the monitoring platform of coastal waters and ecosystems of Mediterranean, which is known as MedTrix. So initially, it was a working tool and the data exchange between Andromeda and the water agency in the Mediterranean course to facilitate the data exchange. And since 2013, it has become a management tool, because this platform allows to have a free and structured access to spatially organized long-term monitoring data, because it has been there for 15 years, and which covers data on sea data, mainly on the French Mediterranean coast, but also some areas in the Atlantic, Italy, Tunisia, etc. And today, Matrix is made up of a cartographic platform, platform Matrix.fr, and then a website as well. We have around 4,000 users with this platform, with a regular registration of about 30 people per month. This platform gather some 40 projects, which are distributed in different categories. So we'll see some project that will address the status of coastal sea, observatory of marine biocenosis, of coastal management, participative science, scientific expedition, ecological restoration, monitoring network. So it is really a large panel of categories. According to the category, we have at least one, two project on surveillance network, where we have the most project, participative science involve only a few projects, and you will see easily we have installed some research system by keywords according to a temperature. All of these words that are related to the small icon that I could see on the slide. We could see all of the projects affiliated to these keywords. Next, please. So a project has the data on the platform and on the internet website. So on the platform, we could see a dynamic map, a summary of a project and mapping tools, whereas on the website we have study reports, contacts and partnership, and the scientific publications, all of the scientific articles related to the project, and then the whole study report, if we take in Mediterranean surveillance, which is known as TEMPO. In the French Mediterranean, we could see the study report published every year since more than 15 years, 13 years. So among those mapping tools, you see the mapping, in different format, PDF. There are graphs, data, mapping, editing, comparison of indicators, pop-up, and heat map. So there are so many tools as we could see. We could see on the left side of a project dynamic map. Here there is a project of marine system modelization through photogrammetry. These tools are available for project, and in the center, it is a map where we could see the different data. The update frequency will range from one project to another. Some are multi-annual and some are annual. On those 40 projects, we have around 50 partners with private or public partners facilitating the project. There is, an image of all of these partners, including private and public structure. So Matrix is a tool that will also integrate the diversity of stakeholders and collaboration among stakeholders, user and decision makers, and also to make highlight the complementary data acquired in the same location to enrich each other and to enhance the global monitoring of coastal waters and the Mediterranean ecosystems. So the idea of this small slide is to show the data collection to data banking. You could see that like for a firm, there is a structure I'm working. It could also be a researcher or other association structure. We will deal with data at sea, data collection at the sea and processing. They could be acoustic measures with a hydrophone, species and landscape illustration, pressures, mapping, physical measurement, acoustic measurement, biological and chemical measurements, and environmental DNA as well. So these are not exhaustive category, but we try to collect the data at the sea, and they will be sent to the metrics team, and metrics team will be in charge of database structuring. So those data transferred will be have the same format of database that will be part of a GIS project integrating annual results to update the project, and then we will do some kind of a co-interpretation with partners, those who are in charge of data collect and analysis, to discuss with them on the interpretation and what they can propose in metrics, and then we disseminate them in metrics, and from this we develop operational indicators. All of these data can also be consulted by decision-making bodies. As an example, with the French Office for Biodiversity and our structure, who can own the data that will allow them, for example, to evaluate data management and the response to regulatory obligations, because there are European directive guidelines or the marine strategy instructions. So by promoting interdirective and sampling strategies, we have different data that are collected in the same coast, but we can improve these efforts of sampling strategy. This is just a graph to present this data collection to data banking. So that was the objective was to present on the next slide an example of data appropriation by decision-making bodies in preserving the herbier posonné, which is endemic marine plants in the Mediterranean Sea, playing an important role. Have under the surveillance network, which is known as IMPACT, that there is a coastal pressure study between which is considered depending on their origin and intensity and the coastal development. But from this data, we can highlight the units. For this, we use the AIS data. So there is a tool that will help as well and present on the great units. And from this AIS position, we published an article on how to identify the anchoring uh, pressure on coastal seabed. And from this, we could identify the sectors. We really had a lot of anchoring on these units, and in parallel, there was also another observatory known as Startat, which deal with marine habitat that we could see on the next slide, which shows in some sector there was a strong reduce of this particular plant, especially in the municipality of Antibes. As you could see on the red, these hair between 2010 and 2018, there are most of around 30% of reduction. So these data, the mapping of habitat, and we could see that it is really correlated. And these are the two slides later on. We see the position of all of those small points of IES. So in the herbium, we could see a cooperation. There was a cooperation between different local actors, the firms, the prefecture, the custom offices, and on the basis of quantitative data, which are rather recent from the surveillance observatory, that will lead to the taking into account to the publication of an order, the order number 123/2019. So it was established between 2020 and 2023. It just to show the dynamics between the history of
préserver un habitat menacé grâce
the impact of anchoring and in the preservation of a threatened habitat thanks to this arrangement. Another example, but I'm not going to detail because I don't have many time. It is the Atlas of Biological Monitoring of Mediterranean Waters, which have compiled more than 426 recent biological data with 13 anthropogenic pressures for the detailed habitat mapping with 6 monitoring networks on the quality of each water. And from this different data, we could redimension the sampling efforts of surveillance network now to intensify the surveillance in some geographic area to reduce them, to optimize and reduce the expenses. Now we can move to the next. This was just to illustrate this part. And to end, the following data are just some tools to show how the user of this platform can also own the data on biodiversity and ecosystem thanks to different tools. There is a tool known as a signal tool that will allow everyone to position their point and to signal if there is a mistake, an error, or something and information worth taking into account. For example, if there is a mistake of Yersin's cartography, each user can also send this information to the team. And we have the MS
Est-ce qu'il y a
Flow, each user can
des projets
add
de
in a
collecte de
project
données
of
sur
a Geographic Information System or QGIS all the data,
du projet
WMS,
aux
the
images de localisation,
WMS on the localization and the surveillance points of mapping.
On a un troisième outil
And we have the third tool, which is the card builder that will allow to add all the online available data on the platform. This structure is very interesting to know at the scale of a bay or what mass or all of the networks that we can access thanks to this tool and the whole position. And finally, we have another tool, which is key numbers. Next slide, please, which shows that there are three different indicators here. For example, for the Positoni Herbion, there are three categories of indicators: of pressure, of status, or of response. As the same with protected herbiome, the regression of a number of surveilling stations. So all of these indicators could be filtered at different spatial scales. There are graphs that will allow us to do spatial and time comparison. All of these platforms, we value the data, we communicate through different tools. So the website with the methodology guide and with tutorial video, which for each tool has some small video and, for you to access to the description of this tool. And then there are scientific publications in relation to the everyone. Could you please skip quickly on the video, and then the scientific publications are here. And finally, we also edit, we publish what we call Cahier de la Surveillance, the surveillance newsletter, which presents the latest news of a project on the platform, which are sent to all of the users of metrics. So there are also some comics strips that will allow to value those data to make them available to everyone. And one last slide to show as well that still in the terms of data valorization, we also hold some symposiums. We've had 4 editions. The last one was in December last year. The objective is to facilitate exchanges between the user, to highlight the work using metrics data to improve his platform, to have a better understanding and use of all the present the latest news and operating tools. Thank you very much for your kind attention. Thank you very much, Gonoel. That was very clear, and we could see the huge potential with Metrics platform. A lot of questions. Also received a lot of questions. A question on the free access to this data. Imagine that there is a study firm who would like to own those data, based on and they sell the data. So how do they do to pay something to the platform, or does everyone can just have access for free to it and can make profit from those data? Well, it is free access. The data that are on the platform are not the gross data. These are processed and summarized data with a partner to access to the gross data. You really need to contact the project implementers that are available on the platform. They allow to summarize data accessible to everyone. It's no longer WMS that will allow the space data in the GIS software. And for some structure, for example, the marine parks or marine reserves, we will give, what we often give is a mapping of the habitat. There are images that will not be usually sufficient, but we can make available some convention that frame the use of this data. And the objective is not to re-own the data, but to find a format that can be used by everyone. And with this flow, WMS flow, that will allow us to access to the latest version of a data layer and not to give any erroneous information. Thank you, Elisa. Do you have any? Have you received any question? Yes, we have one. Someone is asking whether the dimension, the size of cultural heritage is also the purpose of metrics. Well, cultural heritage, can we, well, well, now these data are more data of landscape illustrations on management uh, with areas of habitats or any other, but on cultural level, maybe submarine heritage. In fact, the marine and artificial reefs, we will have data, photographies of all these points and maybe some picture of wreck. Thank you. Any other question on how to make sure on the sustainability of such a platform, as you know that it is run by private structure? So today, the platform itself is funded at for the facilitation side, it is funded by the water agency. So there are requests for allowances, for grants. When we set up a surveillance network, there is a part of data valuing and integration of data on the metrics platform. So now the partners include us in their grant documentation and with data integration on the platform. And we private sector, we also have our self-funding contribution in developing modules and tools that are made available. For example, a comparison study that are available on the platform. It is something that we have developed with an external company. That's it. Thank you. I'm going to ask Gerard to come back with us, and I'm going to ask this last question to Guanoel to keep the continuity. So, what to participate, bring a data to the metrics platform? So, do you think that a project set up by Andrew Seno or funding by the agencies? No. As I said earlier, all the partners, there are so many projects that are Andromed do not intervene. We rather, the Andromed will deal with data recuperation and dissemination on metrics, and everyone can contribute if they wish to enrich this platform. And so we will co-create a project with this person and have a project with the different layers and structure of those data, and then we'll put them available on the platform. Thank you, Guanael. A question for Gérard. You talked about your publication on Seychelles that will be published soon. So how can we find them? And will it be for free or you need to buy it? In fact, it is an existing book published 9 years ago by the Paris and Biotope Invasive Alien Species in Seychelles. This is a copy of a book which has 384 pages, and for the moment you can buy it from the Seychelles Museum at university, La Réunion, I also think, because the author was in La Réunion, but chapter 2 and 6 are already available. I have already sent the chapter 6 to Recos Project. You can already circulate this to everyone. And for the whole book, it will come, but we'll try to negotiate with people to give us something for everyone to be able to download this in electronic format at 35 euros for the price. Thank you very much. One last question for um, collaboration and that will interest all the observer creator, Christelle, who created the platform itself and the free application or of free of right. How does it work? And if you'd like to develop an observatory with the same ambition as yours, so how can we find this kind of a starting point to make them more intelligent in terms of creating an observatory, to have an exchange and feedback between Indian Ocean and the Mediterranean Sea. We have more
Oui,
island-based
donc dans ce
approach.
prototype, il existe
So
plusieurs
for the
observatories open
tools,
source.
there are
Donc
different
c'est
open source. Some of them are
je mets le link
you need
vers
to
un site
pay.
open source
We
qui
move
permet de mettre en utilité
open source
l'observation indien
system,
avec
and there is already a link between Caribbean and Indian Ocean because we use them in Guadeloupe, in Martinique, La Réunion, and Mayotte. So they do work with on QGIS.
l'analyse et le LISMAP. En fait, c'est un LISMAP qui a été
So it is
une extension
an
gratuite
extension, a free extension that you can download on QGIS, and it was redeveloped on Naturalis. It is available, and we can readjust for everyone for their territory. And it is possible, in fact, to use this open source system to develop an observatory. And there are also other sources according to your territory, but there are several open source tools. And on the future collaboration with the other islands, I was at the same time very interested with the intervention, and that's why we managed the link with La Réunion, and even with Seychelles would be very interesting. I did not mention earlier because it was not a specific subtopic for today. For the Martinique, we have a lot of biodiversity monitoring and a lot of eradication actions and predator control with a brigade specialized on those rodents. So this topic do interest us a lot. Yes, I saw this, and you also have a webinar recently as well. We have an intervention of a different biodiversity members. Yeah. Oh, yeah, there is a delegation as well, so yeah, I am also interested. I would like to react that there is an open question of Mr. Cyril Bichot, who asked a question on what's happening with species, autochthone species. Once we remove the predator introduced, and the answer is simple. Most of the time, they will increase in number. That's what I showed in the different slides, But in some cases, it may reduce because especially on the small invertebrate, we could show that there is a reduce of invertebrate because when we remove the rodents, there are more birds and more great invertebrate who catch and eat them. That is the explanation possible that we could find, but maybe there might be other explanation. Thank you very much, Gérard. One last word from Gwenaël, please, before closing this webinar. Uh, Christelle, you have the link for the ad of your future webinar. You can just show them for today's webinar. For the participants, it is an initiative of overseas we organize. I'm going to share the link on the chat box. Gwenaël, please. I just wrote on the chat it was to come back on the fact that I didn't mention it. metrics also work with the plugin LizMap, which is compatible with QGIS. It was just to mention this technical point. Yeah, that's the objective of this exchange today, is to give tips, advice, and experience. Thank you, all the three of you, for your presentation, the richness of your the exchanges. Many thanks to all the participants. One last series on the 27th of June. With a specific focus on coastal economic dynamics. So thank you very much, and we are happy with this partnership with the Coast Project and Island Coast Ocean Solutions. Thank you very much, and see you in the next session. Thank you very much, Gwanael, Christelle, and Gerard. Thank you, everyone.